Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, everyone. So this is the Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 2nd of July 2024. My name is Councillor Miles and I'm going to be chairing today. Just as a reminder to everyone online that the meeting is being live streamed on the YouTube channel. So where possible, keep your cameras on and mics on mute when you're not speaking. I do understand there are a few people who won't be having their cameras on for some of this time. So that's no problem. But for the chat, we're using Zoom. There is that chat function. Please just use that for any technical questions related to the functioning of Zoom, as opposed to any sort of content related questions. These should be dealt with verbally the normal way. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand using the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. And we will be, although this is a remote meeting, just to clarify, this is because of the general election taking some of the meeting rooms up in the council, in the town hall. So that's why we're informal and remote today, but we will be having our recommendations dealt with by the Cabinet in the same way as normal. So just rest assured on that. Okay, so Alice, in terms of apologies and substitutions, can I come to you, please? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we've had apologies from Councillor Malik and also Councillor Stairs, and we have Councillor Henwood here subbing for Councillor Stairs. Sorry, Councillor Miles, you've gone on mute.
Yeah, is that okay? Declarations of interest. Any declarations, please, anyone? I can't see any hands raised at the moment, so assume not. Thank you. Chair's announcements, item number 3. Just one thing to say, this is the first time that many of you have been on this committee, and when we get to the content discussions related to each of the agenda items, one thing that we will be doing in terms of our how we structure the proceedings is we'll be asking questions first of all to the officers and Cabinet members here in attendance, just in terms of clarification on the reports presented, and then we'll focus on the recommendations thereafter. So it's sort of each agenda item we'll deal with in 2 parts, as it were, and when you do start having that discussion around the content of the papers, I'd really appreciate it, and I think for Alice's benefit as well, helping with some of the note taking, please can you state up front if you think you're developing a recommendation with the comments that you're making, so that that it makes it easier to be taking those notes and pulling them together as a recommendation. So that's just something to bear in mind as we go through the process. I'll move on now to item 4, which is the minutes. I'd like to ask the committee if you're happy to approve the minutes of the 5th of June. There are a couple of minor amendments that have been noted, but before we go to a vote on this, are there any other changes that people, any other amends? Can't see any raised hands. No. In which case, just to note that the correction that is required relates to the term adult exploitation referenced under minute 5, and that should say adult exploitation and modern slavery, and the tourism review group update referenced under minute 5 should say tourism, and this will be changed after the meeting. So if we're all happy with that, then can I put this to a vote? I propose that the minutes are approved. Can I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, so they're seconded. Can we vote to approve those minutes then, please? All those in favour, raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, for those who are new to this, if you are in favour, can you please raise your hand? Councillors on the call. Thank you. you a moment to do that. Okay, I think that has carried. Have you got what you need from that, Alice? Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so moving on then to the item number 5. Actually, Alice, just to clarify on this, we move straight on to the citizens experience strategy. Is that correct? Do we have to go through the matters arising first, just to clarify? Yeah. So we're just going to to say that the order of the meeting agenda today, just for the benefit of those officers and cabinet members who are attending, we're going to take in a slightly different order from those listed in the agenda pack. We'll still discuss everything, but we're going to take items 7, 8, 9 and 10 next, and then we'll go on to the work plan and then the report back on recommendations and dates for future meetings at the end of the discussions, because at that point then officers can leave. They don't need to be part of that. So as long as everyone's happy with that, we'll move on. Can't see any hands raised or no. Okay, in which case, well, we'll proceed as follows. So for item number 5, which is item number 7 in the agenda, which is the Citizen Experience Strategy Process Report, we welcome today Councillor Chapman. I think we've got Helen Bishop and Vicky Galvin. Has Tom Hook also joined us now? No. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to invite you to introduce the report to us. Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you very much for having us. And Helen and Vicky will no doubt flesh out some of the details and some of the more technical questions. But I just want to give you a bit of an overview. It's a year since we published the Citizen Experience Strategy. And I think when you read the report, we've really achieved a lot in a year, actually. It's a pretty rich report and some very specific actions have been completed. The strategy is in basically 4 parts. So citizen focused, positive citizen experience, inclusive access, getting it right first time. And under each of those sections, you can see in the cover sheet listed some of the steps forward we've made in the last 12 months. We continue to get, when we have external assessment of our citizen services by independent people, very high marks. And actually, not only do we meet the criteria for citizen excellence, but also actually we often go beyond the call of duty. And I think there's a reference to 13 categories in the paper where we are better than good. We're actually really outstanding and really working more than you would expect. That's good. We are, under citizen focused, also launching the complaints, compliments, etc. System, so we can get more information from citizens about the things they like about what we do, the things they don't like, things they're less unhappy about, and we can tackle those. The residents panel, which has got 1,000 members, is going to be launched this month with a whole range of questions. So, you know, what do they think about the council, down to more granular stuff, which will again help us shape our services. I think that's all very positive feedback we're going to get in terms of actually having proper information about what people think about us. One of the highlights of last year was to relaunch the website completely. The website had been a bit of an embarrassment for quite a while, in my view. It wasn't state of the art, to put it mildly. So we went off and looked at what other councils were doing, and basically, you know, didn't make it too expensive, but we actually chose some good ideas that other people were using, and took a template that was very similar, I think, to Leeds from memory, the website scores have definitely improved significantly in the last 3 months since the launch of the new website. You can see that in the paper. The other thing I've been trying to encourage is to get officers to see themselves as more than just representing their particular department when they go out into the community. So, you know, if an officer's in a locality hub or in a food larder, you want them to be sufficiently across the issues, including, by the way, helping people to register to vote in the general election. So they can actually answer questions, and if they can't, they can go back and get answers to people. So it's a face-to-face opportunity for the public to interact with officers on their own patch, as it were, rather than in, you know, in the town hall or somewhere which is more remote. I think that's been a success. And in terms of, you know, the stats, they tell their own story. We get measured every month against 30 top local authorities, both for telephony scores and for web scores. And we are in the top 10 regularly, sometimes in the top 6. Now, I'd love to be number 1 in both categories, frankly. That would be the ambition. But I'm pretty pleased that we are up in the top 10 all the time, and we can only get better, as they say. And I hope we will, but that's a pretty good story. I think some of the areas that we have to still work on, paying for services online, we're still a bit weak there. A lot of people have to go through to the customer call center to make a payment. And actually, they just want, like any other service, they'll be able to pay online. It's not asking very much. So I think in the next 12 months, you're going to see far more opportunity for people to pay for services online and therefore not have to go and make calls to the customer center, which will obviously reduce traffic to them and make their life easier as well. I think you're going to see a lot more analysis by the BI team about what the data tells us about the way people use our services and how they would like things to be different. And we've got to carry on, getting this right balance, finally, I'd say, between digitization and new technology and making it people to self-serve, do it themselves without any support from a council officer, as against those people in our society who have very complicated issues, often interlocking. So, often around housing, debt, council tax payments, council tax reduction scheme. They're all interlocked together, and you really can't do that stuff online. In reality, you need a face-to-face conversation with an officer. So it's very important we carry on having strong face-to-face services in Westgate Library in particular, in the community hubs. And we continue to have a very responsive telephone contact centre where people can be guided to the right place. They can make a further appointment if they wish to discuss their complex needs. So, there is something like 20% of Oxford's population, which you could broadly describe as digitally disadvantaged. So they don't have access to, fantastic Wi-Fi or great PCs or iPhones or whatever. And we've always got to remember that, as we move forward through the digital revolution, not everybody can come on that journey with us as fast as we would like, and then perhaps they would like too. So we have to have alternative provision and preserve and protect that, particularly for the most complicated interactions that people need private, confidential conversations of a face-to-face nature. So that's by way of introduction. The strategy was due to be refreshed next year anyway, but I thought it was important to have a 1-year sort of, stock take because it's such an important area. That's why I commissioned this, and that's why it's in front of you tonight. I don't know whether my colleagues, Helen and Vicky, would like to add any more, or they just want to wait to respond to some of the kind of in-depth questions, which I'm sure will come from the panel tonight. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Okay, go ahead.
As ever, hi, good evening, everybody. As ever, Councillor Chapman has introduced it perfectly. Just to say that I think one of the important things about that the strategy has done that we brought in last year is it's more wide ranging than previously. We're asking all of the council to be aligned to its principles and making sure that as an organisation and both with other groups and organisations that are in the community, that we're working together to get the right support to make that early intervention for our citizens. And just to say that one of the things that we're looking for today is to get some feedback on the action plan that we've got for 24-25, where we're trying to focus on 4 key areas around improving digital access and automation, as Councillor Chapman has said, improving or optimising the customer insight that the organisation has got so that we can look at trends and respond to improvements. And continue that journey about being better joined up, particularly in our response in providing better access to services in our localities, and finally helping the organisation to build on that culture where we put citizens and communities right in the middle of everything and how we work. So yeah, happy to take questions. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Helen. Do we have any questions or clarifications from people first? I think we'll come on to recommendation formulation afterwards, but first of all, any questions, please? Councillor Mundy first, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the report. So, Nigel, you rightly pointed out about the importance of maintaining that physical presence for the face-to-face appointments that people need, and that those are now in the library. So I just wanted to check really that the library is fit for purpose, or obviously better than that, obviously preferably, and there's obviously the space for us to run our service there, and that space is sufficiently private for people to attend and to share their issues with our officers, without feeling that they're unable to maintain the privacy that they need.
Yeah.
And just also wanted to check, obviously, as you've pointed out already, we're generally obviously getting good feedback on especially the face-to-face, but also the phone call contact seems to be quite well received. But I just wanted to be, clear that we've got a sort of a clear action plan really in terms of making sure that that response on use of the website is going to improve and get to those same levels, hopefully, from the customers who are using the website and the online forms.
Yeah, maybe I should start with the second one first, and then I'll ask Helen to talk about the privacy and confidentiality issue at the Westgate Library. I think clearly the scores for online are improving since the relaunch of the website, which is good. There's still some way to go. Generally, councils don't score as well in online as other areas. So, we could be quite high up in the top 10, frankly, Ed, on online, and we'd only be scoring 60%. I think that's for two reasons. I think we've always got to work harder and harder at navigation and making it easy for people to use it. Now, when we relaunched the website, we did do a lot of user testing to try and make it as intuitive and simple as possible. But I think there's a second phase of development inside for the website to add more bells and whistles, as it were, and to improve it even further. And one of the areas that people then get frustrated about, and I alluded to it early on, is the inability to pay for services online. I mean, in the modern age, everybody buys everything online if they're in a digital world, and they can. But we just really don't offer that. So, if you want to pay for bulky waste collections, you can't do that. If you want to buy some one-off service, you can't. So I think the payment issue, which is going to be tackled in the next 3 months, is an important step forward to improving the scores for the online performance, because it's the missing bit of the jigsaw puzzle at the moment, which people have a right to expect in this modern age. Helen, do you want to talk about confidentiality and
Yes,
also
certainly.
the long-term future of the Westgate, that it's not a sort of experiment. We are committed to being there for the long term.
Yeah, certainly. Just to say that we on average get just over 400 visits every month to the Westgate, and we're there 3 days a week. We have moved, so although we've been in the Westgate probably since early 23, in early 22 rather, we moved in July last year to a more defined space. So we've got a demarked area which we occupy in conjunction with the CAB on 2 of those occasions, and that has got a partition up, and in between each of the desks there are privacy panels. And the other thing to say is there is a separate waiting space. We were very keen to make sure that we had that, acting on feedback from when we first occupied. And the other thing to say is just to provide some reassurance that what we do is we're able to ask every person that we provide a service with for their feedback, and our satisfaction levels actually are really good. With the service that we provide, they're usually sort of like high 90%. So we do get quite a good response from the people that are there. The other thing to say is that being side by side with the Citizens Advice Oxford does mean that we're able to provide a different level of service as well. We're able to refer between the 2 organisations. When we get people particularly that need debt advice, we're able to do that real time and know that people take that advice up, and vice versa. The Citizens Advice are able to come to us for things that we specialise in, which was predominantly around revenues and benefits. The other thing to say is that we're trying to take that service on to the next level. So we've started a soft launch of providing access to a digital cafe there as well. So we're asking people or sounding out if people have got training or support that they need to improve their technical skills so that they can improve their digital access. And we're doing that in conjunction with Barks, Ox and Bucks Integrated Care Board. So we're looking to try and grow that service as well. And just the other thing to say too, it's also mentioned in the report that we know that not everybody wants to come into the city centre, and that's why we're trying to optimise the use of the food larders across the city, and I've got customer service officers that are going in rotation to those larders to make sure that we're able to take that out and outreach into the community as well, and taking, as Councillor Chapman said, relevant service advice out there, which is hopefully timely as well, in conjunction with other things that are happening in the council calendar year. So I hope that provides you with some reassurance. But having said that, every bit of feedback we get, we act on. So you know, I'm not trying to sound glib or thinking that we've got it all nailed, but I hope that we're providing a much better level of service, particularly since we have moved into this specially designed service area since last July. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Helen.
you. Thanks.
I can't see any other hands, in which case just a question from my side, and then we'll move maybe to recommendations unless anything else comes up. And it's really just a clarification. Some of the data that you're communicating is around the lack of digital access, but specifically around internet access. And I wonder whether that is due to a lack of internet connection, a broadband connection, for instance, at the home, or whether it also looked at digital access on handsets, on mobile handsets, because quite often people don't necessarily have it installed in their property, but they might have access online. So do you have any deeper sort of level of analysis of the level of that kind of digital barriers, please? Thank you.
Do you want me to take that? Yes.
Please, if you could,
So,
yeah.
yep, certainly. So, I mean, I think it's both. I think it's having some, as you quite rightly say, some people it's their mobile phone that provides that access, and some people it's a skills thing. So that's one of the reasons why we're hoping that the digital cafe will help with the skills aspect. We've done in conjunction with Activate Learning in Blackbird Leys, we've done a survey to try and see what sort of need we're looking to address. And in response to that, we're trying to work up an appropriate training course for like a taster session. We've yet to get a date nailed and a location. So we are using the feedback that we're getting from our citizens to try and shape what we're doing. But I think you're quite right. There's a broad church of things. It's about technology as well as skill set. So it's really important that any training session covers how you do something on the mobile phone and not and optimize that as and also take advantage of some of so I'm sure you'll know in places like the Westgate, there's opportunity to go and use terminals there as well. So I think it's about trying to cover all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really it is useful to make that distinction going forward around access and usage, because actually many people that do have access maybe just don't know how to use it, and it's fantastic to hear that you've got work going on to address the skills gap as well, which might not be located in one particular area. I can't see any other hands being raised, in which case then just moving on to areas of potential recommendations. The two areas that Councillor Mundy provided feedback on or request information on around maybe on the privacy aspect, I think possibly is settled from the comments that you raised, but we'll open that up to see if anyone's got any feedback on that. And then we've heard from Councillor Chapman around this weakness around online payments, and although there is a very clear plan over the next 3 months around that, the question to the scrutiny panel is whether we feel that there's a recommendation we want to make around that, around acknowledging that this is a priority that we would like to keep an eye on in the coming months, to expedite action on. So anyone want to come in on any recommendations around this strategy update, please? Strategy process. Okay, I can't see any hands raised. What I think we would therefore note, if this is okay, that if members agree, that we would like to have some feedback. Maybe is it you're timetabling this process for the next 3 months, the payment? So maybe towards the end of the year, just maybe receive a feedback on that payment system rollout, if that's okay. Is that
I would like to be, Councillor Miles, I would like to be absolutely definite about the 3 months. I mean, I think that's the aim, but it's definitely in this municipal year. And I think maybe you really want to see, may I suggest, how it's working. It's not just the rollout, it's also how consumers are actually using it, and are they using it in any sort of scale? Has it landed in a positive way? So that might take a bit more than 3 months, that's all I'm saying. But there'll become a moment in time when we'll be able to reveal what we know about that. A, the carrying out of the process, and B, what consumers thought about it.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps it's just to receive an update in due course when this has been rolled out, if other members agree, to understand any teething problems, and to receive an update generally that it's actually happened, given that there's such a need for it, and see what the uptake is. I'm not seeing anyone else raising their hands wanting to come in on that. So in which case, Alice, do you have what you need for just in terms of noting this item and just keeping a watching brief on it rather than a formal recommendation?
Yeah, so what I can do is add it to the list of suggestions for scrutiny suggested items, basically, and then I'll get in contact with officers and cabinet member as needed. Okay, well, in which case then, thank you very much to Councillor Chapman and to the officers for joining today. Thank you, Helen and Vicky, for your contributions and attendance. And well done for the work that you're continuing to do on this. We hope that rollout continues as well as it has done so far. So
okay, thanks very much for having us. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, super. So at which point we then move on to our next agenda item, which is the City Council corporate strategy for 24 to 28. We welcome here tonight Councillor Brown, Mish Tuller and Claire Keane. I believe you all here. I can see Mish, I can see Susan online, and I think Claire is here too. Is that right? Yeah, excellent, super. So yeah, I think just for those of you, many of us are new to this committee, a draft version of this strategy has been before scrutiny previously, I understand, so this is not the first time, and some of you who are new to the council as well, who are only elected this municipal year, just so that you're aware that there were some consultations that have happened with the political groups prior to this point as well, so some feedback has been taken there, so it won't be the first time all of us have seen this. But I'd like to invite Councillor Brown to introduce the report to us, and along with the officers, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Much appreciated. And as you quite rightly point out, this is indeed not the first time, not the first radio on this particular one. And in fact, I certainly feel, and I'm sure officers must feel it even more, that we have talked a lot about this. But that's quite right, because it's a really important document. This is the document that guides the council strategy for the next 4 years. So for those members who perhaps are a bit newer and who may not have benefited from previous discussions, I mean, just to reflect that this is building on an existing but now effectively expired council strategy, that the main priorities, the key priorities of the council have not have not really changed that much, because actually we feel they are still the right priorities. What we have been quite conscious of when we were putting together this strategy is some constructive criticism that we got as part of our Local Government Association peer review, and actually some of the comments that we ourselves fed into that peer review, which is that not least comments previously from Scrutiny, that we felt we were perhaps at times had rather too many priorities, and also that our key performance indicators were not sufficiently tight in terms of being able to measure things that were actually achievable by this council. So we have done a great deal of consultation, and I'll invite Mish and Claire to talk you through that, I think, because they've probably been involved in more of that than I have, but it is set out in the paper. The paper that you see in front of you does reflect the feedback that has been given to us. I mean, I think largely speaking, it has been pretty supportive of the priorities of the council. I think it's not surprising that people, still making additional comments, and that's really welcome. I'm certainly, welcome the priority that people and local residents have given to our priority around good affordable homes. I think it's not surprising that people in our city still feel that is the most important thing. It's very much, I very much share that view. We are desperately short of good affordable homes in this city, unfortunately. All in all, I think there's been some really good discussions, some really good feedback that has been largely taken on in the strategy where it can be. Obviously, some of the comments received were not related to the City Council, so there's not a lot we can do about that other than pass it on. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to answer questions, but I suspect that Mish and Claire might have more to add.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Mish, over to you. Anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. I think the first thing to highlight is, as Councillor Brown referenced, the corporate KPIs. These are going to follow. So they're not included with the paperwork here. We're going to bring them forward, aiming for August cabinet. I'm afraid it's been the plethora of elections has perhaps thrown some of our timelines a little bit out of whack. So that's why they weren't. I hadn't got quite the level of oversight I needed to get to bring them to this meeting. But to the point, and I know that there was some discussion about KPIs at the last time this came to scrutiny. We've taken that on board, and so we hope that they'll be robust and can then be tracked for the full year 4-year period of the strategy. As observed, there's quite a lot of consistency with the preceding 4-year strategy. One of the things that Scrutiny had requested was that we did a bit of comparative work, and actually my colleague Claire has done that, and so I suggest that we send a paper to Alice such that she can share that with Scrutiny members, which essentially just looks at kind of the progression of different objectives under each of those two strategies. And just on the sort of on the consultation process, I mean, it was a very long process which kicked off, I think, around June last year, the first meetings that we had, and a lot of focus with external stakeholders. It was individual sessions were offered to each of the political groups, as was in the council at the time, and 4 of the 5 groups as were constituted at that point took up that offer. And we also obviously did quite a lot of internal sort of discussion with staff and our many officers who have got sort of expert knowledge of the different areas. And I think that's probably the points I could usefully make at this moment.
Thank you, Mish. Claire, anything from your side? Otherwise, we'll...
I think Mish and Susan have covered everything, but I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, super. Thank you. So, yeah, over to the panel. I will take, given that there may well be many questions, I'll take a couple at a time. Has anyone got their hands raised? Please do raise them if you have any questions or clarifications at this stage. While you're thinking about it, I will put forward a clarification from my side, which is what I'm seeing is that there are certain areas that are responsibilities of the council, such as licensing, environmental health, noise control, for instance. These areas which are perhaps, the City Council is the only entity that is responsible for these because they're statutory powers. And I don't see them necessarily reflected in the content of the strategy. So I'm wondering how or where do you intend to address them? Is this been an intentional decision, really? So that is the first thing. And then in terms of the zero carbon Oxford and the decarbonisation of homes and other buildings, you refer to other buildings, but could you maybe elaborate which other buildings are you referring to there? It's a very, other buildings is a very broad term. So just wanting clarification on that. And then the final point is around some cities bill themselves as child-friendly cities. We know that there aren't that many children in the city of Oxford, that's declining numbers. Is there anything that you've considered as part of this process to see what can be done to make the public space more child-friendly, given that this is public realm improvement is an area of focus? So those are three points from my side. I'm checking to see whether anyone else has raised their hands, which they haven't. So in which case, maybe you could deal with those first while others are thinking about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm happy to have a first stab at those. So firstly, on our statutory services and other services that might not be covered in this very top level document, don't worry, it's not that we don't continue to wish to provide those services. It's just that we have tried to make this a top level strategic document and about the kind of strategic direction of the council. A lot of services, we are really important, and we absolutely wish to continue to provide them, and they are very important to us. They will feature in business plans of the organisation and different departments, but will be guided by these overall strategic priorities. So I hope that addresses that point. And in terms of the reference to other council buildings, I think this is in. Sorry, I'm just trying to check the page number 144 of your agenda. So this is under the zero carbon Oxford priorities that you're referring to. And by other council buildings, I would assume that references any other property that the council owns. So that might run from community centres that the council owns, to leisure centres that the council owns, to the town hall, which is a big challenge in terms of zero carbon. And I mean, just to be very, very clear, our ambitions in this area are somewhat tempered by our ability to pay for some of this work currently. So unless funds become available, some of this work is not going to be able to be delivered.
Okay, thank you, Susan, for that. So in terms of the point around the child-friendly cities, and I know that there are certain cities are built on that. Is that something that one of the officers would maybe like to address? Or
absolutely. We haven't done any specific work around being a child-friendly city, albeit interestingly, we have kicked off a piece of work. It was kicked off just a couple of months ago around being an age-friendly city. So that's something which, in fact, Claire here is leading that piece of work, working with external partners. I think on the kind of perhaps the broader point in terms of children and young people, just the reassurance that we did engage the council's Children and Young People Partnership as part of the process of getting input around the development of this corporate strategy. Again, I think it's a high-level document that serves to sort of try and create some overall direction rather than maybe specific commitments of that nature.
Thank you. If there's nothing else to that, I can see that Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Ottino have got their hands raised in terms of clarification. So Councillor Jarvis first, and then we'll come to Councillor Ottino. So yeah, Chris, please.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Susan Mission-Clare, on the report. I guess it's really a general question, sort of following up from Councillor Brown's last comments, really, around the degree to which, you know, the zero carbon ambitions are tempered by financial realities. And I guess the question then that springs from that is, I guess, firstly, generally, what proportion of the strategy document are we assuming is deliverable in the current financial situation? And then how does this document sort of sit alongside our wider budget setting processes and the decision making around, you know, securing funds more generally?
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Please go ahead. Thanks.
Should I pick that up? The zero carbon sort of area of focus.
Sorry, I was assuming that we were going to take both questions and then come back, but
yeah, sorry, you're right. Let's just thank you. Let's do that. So, Councillor Ottino, if maybe you could share those your questions as well, and then we'll take them together. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose it was more an observation about the child-friendly bit, in that the reason the children are declining in this city, is that not to do with house prices? And if we are trying to build more affordable houses, that's the main way we can make the city more friendly for families. And the fact that families can't afford to live here is why I think our numbers of children are declining.
So maybe with that in mind, I guess a reflection from officers on whether they think that this is the driver around, so it's around residential children, children as residents in the city, but there's also the angle maybe of children as visitors to the city. But any reflections you have on Councillor Ottino's point would be welcome. So yeah, handing back to officers now. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, if I may, just because I do apologise, Chair, because I completely forgot about your question about child friendly and I didn't respond to it. So may I also respond to that? I would entirely agree with Councillor Ottino that it is the decline of children in the city is unfortunately related to the affordability of housing in the city, and I think it is one of the best things that we can do to help children and the children living in poverty in our city is to address the housing problems that we face, and that's what this plan does. It seeks to address the huge gap that there is in affordable housing, to build more council houses, to do everything we can to drive up standards in the private rented sector as well. And, you know, who knows, we may have a new government within a few days who may help us with some of the policies around the private rented sector and housing more generally as well. So that would all be very welcome and fit well with our plans. I would also add, though, that I think we have pretty good provision as a city generally in terms of play parks, leisure centres, and affordable leisure options for children and families with children. So, you know, there are a lot of activities that are available to children across our city, including free swimming in our swimming pools, and play schemes in the summer and so on. So I don't think that, for the most part, we have got huge gaps in that time, those sorts of provisions. There are perhaps some areas of the city, and actually notably the city centre is one of them, where there isn't as much play space for children as we would like. On the deliverability of the plan, Chris's question, I mean, I think the plan is very clear. These are the objectives we wish to do, that we are setting ourselves subject to, and it very, very specifically says that, the ability to fund it, the scale of investment needed. So, you know, we make no apologies, as always, for being ambitious as a council. we want to have plans ready so that when finances become available, we can deliver them quickly. But it will always be tempered by our ability to be responsible with our finances and pay for these things to happen. And obviously, we are also not just sitting around and waiting for money to come to us. We are actually taking active steps to try and bring in that funding, whether that's through our wholly owned companies, whether it's through the investments we make as a city in projects like Oxwed, or whether it's seeking particular financial pots of money from government or elsewhere. So all of those things are important. And also, in relation to that point, yes, of course, this does sit alongside the budget process, and these strategic priorities are the priorities that feed into our budget process as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Are there any comments from officers in response to the points made as well? Anything you'd like to add at this stage?
Well, just also perhaps on the zero carbon point, that we do have in a sense, we have a capacity and resource dedicated to delivering in this space, both from the council's own stock perspective, which is referenced in the strategy, but also the wider city-wide perspective too, which is also, of course, our 2040 target, and where one of the things that we are proposing is an expansion of ZCOP to make it a county-wide body and bring in even more members and build that capacity further. We've attracted significant amount, nearly £1 million of funding in through ZCOP just as a city entity to date. All of that helps, and I think it's then looking to an incoming government to see about how much investment they're prepared to put into everything from the kind of green skills development, retrofitting, and so on. But then there are other things within the strategy, for example, in the planning space, which, of course, would set a net zero new build requirements, and things that so long as we're able to do so with a new local plan, don't necessarily cost us significant additional money.
Just picking up as well on the child-friendly city questions. In the early work that I've done so far on the age-friendly city, a couple of points that have come out quite clearly is that if you can make somewhere accessible for older people, it's also very much accessible for people with children. A lot of those kind of access issues are sort of common to people with small children and to people to older people as well. And so some of the work that we've already done with Access Able, which plots accessibility of venues in the city centre, actually is really sort of quite an important foundation for making the city centre a usable place for people with young children as well as older people. And obviously that's a piece of work that's going forward around really basic things like where can you sit and are there toilets that you can use, that actually just really do make a difference to being able to bring your children into town and enjoy what's there.
Thank you, Claire. Really helpful insights there, and we really appreciate the work you've been doing on that. I can't see any additional hands at this stage. There was one final clarification I had, if I may, and that's around when you talk about references to active travel and influencing efforts to support people to move around the city more easily, given the county's partnership approach for Vision Zero, which is around eliminating death and serious injury and a focus around sort of safe systems approach and road safety. I'm wondering whether or not you've considered any kind of cross-reference of sort of influencing the work around that and contributing to that, because they're quite strong goals, and I know that they it does affect other areas of our policy where there's sort of joint commitments with the city and county. So just wondering, have you considered explicitly referencing Vision Zero within the strategy? Thank you.
My recollection is we did have a discussion around this previously when it came to scrutiny, and I think that we didn't really feel that it sat in our corporate strategy because we are trying to focus on the services and differences that we can make most clearly, and as previously discussed, transport is the responsibility of the county council, not us. Obviously, there are some things that we can do through our local plan process, and we do work closely with the county to make sure that we reflect their transport priorities in our local plan, and so that's probably the place in which those sorts of discussions are better had.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm seeing whether or not anyone else has got any hands. I can't see that. So what we'll do, we'll move to a discussion now on any recommendations that are emerging from what we've heard. I think what I can see coming through this is potentially an acknowledgement within the strategy as it gets documented around that of this decline in children related to the affordability of housing. So whether or not that link can be made. We also have something coming up potentially around sort of the feasibility of delivery of sort of ambitious goals on carbon reduction alongside the budget setting process. Perhaps Councillor Jarvis might want to consider something there, and the gap in provision in the city centre around play parks, for instance, for children. Maybe that's something that we could look at in terms of a recommendation, and also an acknowledgement of the work that's been going on around age-friendly cities, age and child-friendly cities, perhaps. So maybe there's a recommendation there. So I'd like to open up to the floor and see whether what members think around recommendations in these areas, or if there are any other recommendations that you'd like to see. So can I see hands? Councillor Ottino, please, over to you.
I mean, I see the city centre thing as an aspiration, but do we actually own that much land in the city centre? Isn't it all so dominated by the university? I mean, maybe we could encourage them to perhaps put some play equipment in their parks, but they probably like we might encourage them to allow cycling through, but they don't. So I'm not sure the ability of a city council's got to influence a lot of that stuff.
Okay, just maybe on that point, there is the whole Broad Street redevelopment, so there is an opportunity of that. I know that we will have some influence. Don't know who owns which part of it, but perhaps putting something around making that child and age friendly might be something that we might look to do. So since that development will be on the cards in the near future, so that's something to consider. Councillor Brown's got her hand up, so maybe to Councillor Brown while other members are thinking of interventions. Please, Councillor Brown, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I don't think this is quite the right document for that, this level of detail. But I wanted to reassure you that it is very much, something that we are bearing in mind for the city centre, and it remains part of our city centre strategy plan, which is sits under this, if you like, and also under our economic strategy. So it remains an ambition for the city centre as and when and if, and Councillor Ottino is right, the opportunity arises, because obviously land in the city centre is not easily obtained, and play parks are not likely to be the first thought of many developers. So we have some ambitions to try and create space where we can, if we can, but I don't think that sort of sits at this kind of high level corporate strategy level, something as specific as can we have a play park in a particular area.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments here? Okay, so I think on this point, taking into account what Councillor Brown has said, if we're wanting to be pitching any of this at that slightly higher level, really it's around articulating maybe a recommendation or and reflecting this priority to make the city both age and child friendly. And I think, and then that concept of making it as inclusive as possible from an age perspective, you know, at all years, from child to elderly, then that concept is there in that strategy, but then gets implemented in more detail in these supporting strategies, as Councillor Brown has referred to. So perhaps that's something that we could consider. Councillor Mundy, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in on this or any of the other recommendations? Thank you.
Yes. So obviously in the strategy, it does reference poverty and child poverty, and obviously within the Thriving Community strategy. And I just wondered whether it would be appropriate as a recommendation to specifically refer to the work of the Child Poverty Review Group and a socio-economic duty to take actions that are going to ensure that we're actually reducing inequality at every level, and in particular the inequality of children in poverty.
Thank you. I can see that Chris Bell has his hand raised. I can't see other councillors with their hand raised at this point, but Chris Bell, please, would you like to maybe provide any clarification to Councillor Mundy's proposal, please?
Just to highlight already that all of the city council's play facilities are free at the point of entry, something which I'm very proud of. I go to other places as a green flag judge, and there's considerable charge for some of the play facilities, particularly Go Ape and Splash. So we're already sort of have that policy in place, equally for older people as well. There's very significant charges for public toilets, which we don't have in the city. So both of those ensure equality of access.
Thank you for those points, Chris. I think that's really helpful, that we actually maybe not citing this in our ambition to be age and child friendly, but actually what we're doing in practice perhaps is reflecting that. So perhaps there is, I think, again, back to this recommendation that we state explicitly about our ambition to be child and inclusive in terms of age and both child friendly and older people friendly. On the point that Councillor Mundy has tabled as a recommendation, happy to go along with that. Have we got anyone else want to comment on that proposal around the Child Poverty Review Group and also the socio-economic duty to take action? Okay. I know that it's new, this process, for many of you, so please don't feel shy in sharing your comments or thoughts. Everybody's view is important, and we do try and capture that. I'm sure it's reflected in the recommendations. So, okay. So then I think we'll draw then this to a close in case we've got any other formal recommendations. Maybe going back to Councillor Jarvis, is there anything that you'd like to close up on in terms of a recommendation related to the zero carbon point you raised earlier, and the level of ambition on that versus the budget setting? Any clarification there?
No, I think it probably doesn't sit at this level, but obviously, you know, it would be useful to more broadly have a sense of, you know, one or two tiers down from this document, what are the, you know, the essentials, what are the definites, and what are the things that are subject to funding, and to have that sort of spelt out, but that's probably not for this level.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback, Chris. I think this is something that perhaps we could pass on to the climate panel as they discuss some of the more specific operational matters related to this. So we can pass that on to them. But note, please, Alice, that this is
a recommendation at that level rather than related to the scrutiny, the corporate strategy. So we've then got 2 recommendations emerging from this around the ambition around child-friendly, age-friendly, and we've got this recommendation around cross-reference of socioeconomic duty to take action and child poverty review group. So I think at that point, unless at any final points, I've got one more hand up, I think. Is there another hand that has been raised? Simon.
Yeah, sorry, it's maybe what Chris has just said, but if all this stuff around getting zero carbon is so financially challenging, is there a detail of what, given the limited amount of money we might have, what is the most effective thing to be working on? Is it council housing, or is it other buildings, or whatever? I mean, yeah, clearly we're not going to achieve all of it. Is that in this document, or is that being a different document where the most effective use of a tiny bit of money would be?
Okay, so on that, I think then it's whether we've got this ambition, but whether we need in the corporate strategy to reflect more some of the funding constraints, sort of where those are, and maybe highlight how we prioritise the delivery of this ambition based on these funding constraints. So maybe is that a recommendation that you think you'd like to see reflected in the content of the strategy itself? So it is clearer up front that whilst we have this ambition, there is that recognition of a prioritisation exercise that's being applied to how this is delivered. Simon, is that what you've got in mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Just maybe going back to Alice, have you got what you need from us in terms of recommendations?
Yeah, I think so. So I think I've got 3 at the minute. I've got one about reflecting as a priority to make age and child-friendly city. I've got the one around the socio-economic duty and child poverty review group being referenced, and then this recent one about making it more explicit in the strategy about what's funded and referencing prioritization as part of that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So at this point, these are the recommendations that we're working with. I think we don't need to vote on this, do we? I think it seems to be consensus around these. In which case, then I'd like to really just say thank you to the Councillor Brown and Ms. Sinclair for attending. So really, thank you for your time this evening, and you're free to leave. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for your time and your work on this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. Bye.
So now then we move on to item number 7, which was item 9 in the agenda pack. This is the update of bylaws on parks and open spaces. We've got Councillor McCongay here, Tom Bridgman and Chris Bell, who will be introducing the report to us. So thank you for attending, and I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a technical paper. Probably I won't speak much, but just happy to introduce it. Members, we haven't updated the bylaws in Oxford for more than 25 years. So this is the time that we should update them. Some of the bylaws are outdated, for example, sorry. For example, they are based on the parks that they don't exist anymore, or on the parks that have changed names. And some of the bylaws, we can see them as being discriminatory at the moment. For example, banning children to climb the trees in the parks, or for ball games that now we are promoting for our young people, as you were talking about them, to be active. The paper in front of you has been already in the council, and it has been approved for the consultation. It was a lot of work, so the consultation actually began in February up to April. So what you are trying to do now is for you to consider the report, because we have got the results of the consultation that will go to the Secretary of State for approval. Correct me if probably Tom or Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, but even if after the approval from the Secretary of State, we will consult on the approval again to go back for the final approval. So there's a lot of work to be done on there. The report has obviously alerted the set of consultees and the results that I, amazed of the amount of responses we got from both online and consulting both our stakeholders in the organization, in the City Council, and outside the council, the park users, and of course for those people who don't live in Oxford. Broadly, the result shows that there's obviously a blanket support of collectively of the bylaws that we are proposing, also individually of specific bylaws. There's a lot of bylaws that we're updating, but obviously the controversial one that seems to be coming up is the lifting of the blanket ban in the parks. I'll just briefly touch on that. Members, we have got more than 130 parks and open spaces. So if we don't lift the ban, it's so much difficult to enforce and implement. How many officers would you need? So broadly, there's support to lift the ban bar on the 3 green spaces and obviously any park. Obviously, that's just a little bit of introduction. I'll call upon Tom and Chris to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mukonge. Would Tom or Chris like to come in and make some additional comments, please, before we open up for clarifications?
Happy to go, Tom, unless you wish to go first.
Yeah, sorry, I just had my screen cut out. Apologies. Chris, I think Chris might want to take us through a little bit more of the substance. I just wanted to point out that Chewy is correct that a paper on this has been to council already. Actually, but the paper in front of you is actually wending its way to council in July before it goes to Secretary of State, and we want to do that because we want to make sure that council is broadly happy with the proposed bylaws before we consult the Secretary of State. But then once the Secretary of State comes back, we then have to go back to council again. So it's quite a bureaucratic process, but nonetheless, that's what's required to effectively extinguish the old set of bylaws and introduce a whole new set. So that's the process that we're underway with. Chris may want to come in on any more detail, although to be honest, I think Chewy did a very good job of giving you a summary.
Yeah. So given the apparently dry nature of the consultation, we're very pleased to get such a high response, well over 500 online responses, and responses also from stakeholder groups in the parks. And there was actually very clear support for the bylaws. People understood why you need them in place to ensure everybody's sort of safety and consideration for other users. So they supported them overall and in individual bylaws. And yes, certainly the lifting of the blanket ban on cycling in parks is one of the more controversial subjects. As Chewy alluded to, it is unenforceable regardless, unless you've got an army of staff sort of standing on each entrance of each of the 130 odd green spaces. It's not possible to enforce it. But the public were clear as well that they consider that the benefits outweigh the negatives, and they want to cycle to school and to work, where they can. And as long as people cycle considerately, then that seemed to be the preferred option. I may just say that there were some slight changes to the actual bylaws, the wording of the bylaws themselves relating to cycling since it was submitted to this group. There have been some legal challenges about the wording. and we just need to get it absolutely right. There are some complications. So, for example, Hinksey Park, public and members were clear that they want to retain the ban on cycling in the inner area of Hinksey Park because of the sharp bend and narrow paths. But there is a cycle track, formal cycle track that goes through the middle. So you've just got to get the right wording that accommodates both of those things. And there's still some toing and froing, but good in a way that we're having all this now to make sure that document is right, because it could sit with us for another 30 or 40 years once it's been approved, as if it is approved.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful background. Any questions or clarifications from anyone? Councillor Ottino and Councillor Henwood, we'll take your questions together and then we'll put them back to the officers. And we've also got Councillor Asima as well. Okay, we'll take those first three and then we will go to officers. So please, Simon Festival, thank you.
Yeah, are there any issues around defining what a bicycle is nowadays? There's like a whole variety of things, some of which travel incredibly fast and are pretty heavy, in terms of what we're saying is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. There'll be concern in some parts that they're going to get people whizzing around on something closer to a motorbike, I think. And the other thing is what conversations you had with the university, because they own parks and very close to our city centre, and we want people to cycle to our city centre. Have you had any luck in trying to influence them to change their policy?
Thank you, Councillor Ottino. We'll come to Councillor Henwood now. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you for the work that's been done on this report. I would like to raise just a small concern on active living and encouraging people to climb trees. I'm not against the idea, and I think to a degree I think it's a good idea. My concern is during the nesting season, are we still going to be encouraging people to climb trees?
Thank you. That's a very interesting angle to raise. Councillor Kayum, Asima Kayum, apologies if I'm mispronouncing. Yeah, please.
Thank you for your work on this. I think it's great, and especially the bit that's been taken out about the teenagers and the play areas. I can't believe that was a thing in there. But just a question about the cycling in particular. I know in the bylaw it's quite specific to say that to prevent any dangerous kind of behavior of cycling or to prevent any annoyance. But if there is any negative repercussions that rise from this, is there like a trial period where it could be reviewed or amended, or is there anything like that?
Thank you for those questions. So we've got 3 points around the definition of a bike and collaboration with universities around their approach in their parks, which is slightly off the bylaw question, but it relates to some of the same questions. This active living, tree climbing in the nesting season, concerns around that, and then the negative repercussions as well. So any, officers would like to respond
yes,
to those?
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, so it's fine. So in terms of the bicycle, what denotes bicycle, yes, I think we do need to do some more clarifications on that. Things are changing rapidly. I suppose it's difficult though, isn't it, really? If you have an older person that has an e-bike who cycles in a considerate way, we want to be careful not to discriminate against them in a way that it's the thing in general. What we want is people just to cycle, whatever their mode, in a considerate way, that respects other people. How easy that's going to be enforced is another matter, but I'd be a bit concerned about having some hard and fast rules. The introduction of e-bikes has meant that some of the older people now can go back to cycling, and I say this as an over 60 with some arthritis. It's reintroduced cycling to some people, so it is going to be a difficult balance. Do you want to come in at that point, Tom, or Sean?
Thank you, Chris. Tom, over to you.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to speak. Forgive me. Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to reflect on that. I mean, I think, Chris, when you and I have spoken, we want to make sure that bicycles and e-bikes are seen as one of the same for the reason you've talked about. But I think there's probably something around the e-bikes and the speed restriction. I mean, we thought a bit hard that we might want to consider, but we can reflect on that. I know that some e-bikes are restricted to 15 kilometers an hour, and we may, again, the problem is we want to future-proof this, but that doesn't feel unreasonable, but we can pick that one up.
In terms of the university, they have a very strict rule about bikes, about banning bikes, but it also means that they restrict some of the access points. And any access point into green space that restricts bikes also restricts access to mobility scooters, wheelchairs, and larger pushchairs. So I'm glad that we are, although it's difficult to enforce without, I'm glad that we're not in that position, that we do make sure that we maintain access for everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, having tried to get a pushchair through Christchurch Meadows sort of gate, yeah, you have to collapse the whole thing. It's quite tricky. So really appreciate the work that you do on maintaining that accessibility. So thank you. There was this concern around nesting seasons in the trees. Could you maybe talk to that point, please? Thank you.
So in terms of bylaws, they're not, if we change the bylaws, they're not there to encourage a particular activity just because we drop the bylaw against it. It's just that threatening court action is not an appropriate or proportionate response for a child or a young person climbing a tree. So, you can say to somebody, the park staff, get out of that tree. This person has to, you don't threaten them with court action. It's just an inappropriate response. So it's just about, it's trying to make sure the bylaws are there to deal with public safety and public consideration. We don't want things that are disproportionate because it sort of waters down the other bylaws, which are there to protect people and to protect the habitats, things. And it's it's the same with ball games. You don't threaten young people. I'll take you to court if you don't start playing ball in this particular area, kicking a ball against a wall. Just tell them to stop it and go away. So it doesn't.
But I think, Councillor Henwood, I think to build on Chris's answer, then I think the answer is we won't be encouraging tree climbing but I mean that, and so therefore I think you asked this, you've asked this before, but I think the fact that we're not encouraging is the key point here. We're not banning it, but we're also not encouraging it.
Just maybe a clarification on this point in terms of the council's liability by removing the no tree climbing. Did that leave us in a difficult position if, for instance, someone did climb the tree and fell out? Would we be liable? I know that you're consulting with a lawyer on this.
I mean, no more liable than we are now. I mean, you're liable. We're liable as much. No, there's no additional liability.
Thank you.
But we do retain a latent liability as any property owner does.
Thank you. And then there was this point around revisiting the bylaws once we've made changes to them. So will there be a formal process of sort of review at a given moment in time? This was Asima's question. Thank you.
No, once the bylaws have gone to the Secretary of State and come back and been approved by Council, then they are in place unless we want to change them again in future. So we'll say again, this is another one. We're not changing anything. We're not encouraging anything. One of the main reasons we're dropping the bylaw against cycling parks is that it's simply unenforceable. So it's no good having things in place which you are unable to enforce. And also the public were clear that they wanted this, they wanted children to be able to go to school and stuff without the sort of threat hanging over them or things. So it's, the public had, and I was surprised actually at the level of support. I thought it would be closer than it was, but actually they were quite clear in the end in the votes that they wanted to remove the blanket ban.
Thank you, Chris, for that clarification, and thank you also for acknowledging these differences of the sites of special interest, scientific interest, because I think that certainly we heard that view coming through. I've got both Councillor Mundy with his hand raised and Councillor Artino, so 2 further clarifications. We'll take them together and then come back to you. Oh, and I think we had Chris Jarvis, Councillor Jarvis. I saw your hand was raised earlier, but it's now down. So if you do want to put that out, we'll take that together as well. So Councillor Mundy first, and then thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to welcome the suggestion that looks like it come from the public consultation to include reference to the word endangerment when it came to public nuisance, which I think is useful, especially when we're talking about cycling and ball games being permitted, because it sort of prevents perhaps. The example I thought of was people playing golf, because you do sometimes, I don't think there's any in Oxford, but you sometimes see signs up in public parks that say no golf, because obviously that's potentially quite sort of reckless. So I do welcome that, because that certainly would mean that we sort of have a case against anybody who's cycling or ball playing or even swimming in a way that is annoying or endangering others. I mean, all I was going to say as well is about the wild swimming. I don't think I'd be swimming in the rivers at the moment with the way Thames water are behaving, but I guess, as you say, we're not encouraging it. So yeah, it's that's fair enough, and certainly hopefully in as near a future as possible we will have rivers that we'd be happy to swim in.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy. Councillor Artino, please.
Yeah, do we have any parks where there's bylaws preventing us having paths? Because in effect, that stops you from cycling. A vague idea, but that might be true about South Parks. But and if that is the case, ought we to be changing those bylaws as well, so that would encourage or make possible cycling through those parks?
Thank you.
No, so the idea was, well, the public request was to lift the blanket ban. So we can't just restrict it to where there are sort of designated routes and cycle tracks. It's got to be in general. I mean, people generally don't. So we don't get a lot of cycling in South Park, for example, unless it's through the top park. People generally prefer to stick to where there are paths.
I mean, there are. I mean, if I may, Chair, there are. I think what you're referring to is there are some covenants which maybe prevent certain development activities happening in South Park, which probably those covenants, which I think Oxford are in favour of Oxford Preservation Trust, probably do restrict us building paths as well as putting certain types of lighting up, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But that's just to clarify what I think exists within South Park and probably some other areas within the area that they have covenants over.
Okay.
Just go back on the point of endangerment. I think that's an important point, because even where we've dropped some of the bylaws, there are some general bylaws that allow us to deal with inappropriate behaviour, whatever that is. And unfortunately, I have seen people do some extraordinary things. Like, I mean, I've seen somebody in the car park at Cutslow Park driving a golf ball, striking a golf ball down towards the park from the car park. So there are people that are stupid enough and dangerous enough to do these things. So unfortunately, those things do happen.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. So Councillor Henwood's got his hand raised. So to you, and then if Chris does want to come in after all, do come in after Councillor Henwood. But otherwise, then we'll come back to officers. David, please.
We raised before whether on council-owned moorings on the river, whether we would be putting in as a bylaw that boats that do moor on our sites have a BSI certificate, a boat MOT. Has that been taken up?
Apologies, Councillor Henwood. We haven't got back to you directly on that. Chris can come back on the detailed consideration, but Chris and I have spoken about it, but Chris can come back on the reasons why we feel it's not for inclusion in this, but is an important point, Chris.
Yeah, so just that's managed by the Environment Agency. We don't have boat owner details and contacts, so all we do have resident mooring, and it's just to whom it may concern. We have neither the authority or the staffing to police where the boats have MOTs, but that is already policed by the Environment Agency.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so I can't see any further hands raised. We will be seeing this again anyway at the full council, but I think there are a couple of recommendations that are potentially emerging from this. One is around definition of bikes and future-proofing that. Do we want to have something around the speed restriction around bikes, recognizing that we are talking about electric bikes as part of our definition, but that these come in many forms, some of which are illegal actually, but is there a speed restriction part related to this? And then there were a couple of points raised around antisocial behaviour and enforcement and difficulties with this. I wonder, and this is from my side, whether or not we would want to consider ensuring that reporting information is clearly displayed in the parks, so that on the notice boards around antisocial behaviour reporting, because I think what has been raised is around ASB, and that is something that the council does deal with. But if residents are unsure about how to report that, maybe that is a communications channel that could be used on the notice boards within the parks. So it's something to consider. Any thoughts, first of all, on the definition of bikes and speed restrictions and a recommendation around that? Does that alleviate any concerns? Councillor Ottino, please.
Yeah, I think it's possibly a speed restriction would be the way of doing it. Don't know how you'd agree what that was, but because obviously we can't predict what's going to come in the future in terms of bikes. But yeah, I think it's the speed that's what we're worried about. And some things go very fast and they look pretty heavy.
Thank you. And I think actually, I mean, these bikes in theory are, I think electric bikes have a speed restriction built in, and they're illegal over a certain speed anyway. So perhaps there's some law anyway that can be cited related to that. And I think part of the problem with some of the delivery drivers that we see or others on the roads who have bikes that look more like motorbikes rather than an electric bike is that they're actually going over and above what the legal speed is for that type of bike. So it could be that we could look at, or we could refer officers to any legal limits around electric bike speeds, or how other councils have addressed this. Councillor Henwood, please.
Myself, it's just if we open up the door to electric bikes, are we opening up the door to electric motorcycles? No, different issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Again, I mean, Chris is getting quite expert in defining these things, but I think there are ways of defining with, both with speed, and I think there's also something about pedals, but I mean, I think the combination of speed and pedals, I know you get those mopeds, don't you? But I think the speed would deal with that. I mean, the other thing we've been discussing is electric scooters, and we've clearly in the bylaws differentiated between bikes and e-bikes and scooters would continue to be banned, but or prohibited. But yeah, I think it's a really good point. We just need to get the definition right and to be as broad as possible, but also future proofed. And I think we'll take that challenge away.
Thank you. Councillor McConaughey wants to come in on this point, so over to you, please.
Yes, just building up Tom's point there. I mean, this is why we are saying Tom and Chris and the team have done a brilliant job, because every changes has to go through legal advice. So when you change something, it has got implications with the bylaws. So yes, thank you very much, the team, for the work that you're doing. It hasn't been easy, even setting up the questions to go for consultation. Every bit of it was we had to seek legal advice on them.
Thank you, Councillor Makonge, and yes, really excellent work to everyone, and also to the solicitor that's been, or barrister that's been working with you on this. So because of the legal questions, so really appreciate their work. I think we've dealt with a recommendation around the speed restriction point, and so Alice, do you feel you've captured everything you need to on that point, please?
Yeah, I can pull something together on that.
Thank you very much. And then turning to this theme of antisocial behaviour reporting, do we want to recommend anything about that, recognising that enforcement is difficult, but actually maybe we could at least highlight channels that residents could complain to if there were antisocial behaviour issues emerging. Okay. So I don't see anyone disagreeing with the idea that I put forward as a suggestion that information could be included on notice boards at parks. So maybe we could include that as a recommendation. That's not with the bylaws itself, but just as a way to deal with that behaviour issue that can be taken away sort of more as a action outside the bylaws. I don't know how you would frame that, but if we could look at that, please, as a recommendation to alleviate concerns. And if there are no other points, I think that concludes then the recommendations for this agenda item. Okay, well, look, thank you for that. I think so. We've got one formal recommendation related to the bylaws itself, and then one which is a more general point. So at this point, I'd like to thank Chewy and Tom and Chris for all their work on this and their contributions as well this evening. So I think you, Chewy, you're going to be continuing to stay with us, are you, for this next agenda item? But for those that aren't, thank you very much and have a nice rest of your evening. Okay. So then we will move on to agenda item 8, which is 10 in the agenda pack. This is the Leisure Investment Programme. Now, just to highlight, the Appendix 4 is exempt, and so if we do want to discuss anything related to that item, then we will have to go into private session. So what I would suggest is that we focus on everything that can be discussed in public first, and if we do want to discuss that appendix at some point, then we leave that to the end, if that's okay, or at least alert us to the point when you want to refer to it. Okay, so in which case then, Councillor Makonge, I think we've got Peter Matthew joining us, Nigel Kennedy and Hagen Lewisman. So I invite you to present the report to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to present this report to you because I can confidently say that this changeover from our previous provider to more leisure has been successful. Saying this because I've been there as a cabinet member for the during the transition and during the previous provider. So we have moved on from what we are calling the demobilization and mobilization now. So from mobilization to contract management, which is an exciting part. We acknowledge there's been some teething problems that we would expect on the change of the contract of this level, and I can announce that those teething problems are reducing day by day. Well, we're coming to you during the procurement process. We knew that our leisure centers, ice rink, and outdoor swimming pool will need to be improved for them to be fit for purpose, future leisure centers. So in our budget, we did actually provide for 2 million improvement programs. That was just an improvement. The money we thought was enough, but all the tenders were actually invited to provide a program of how much that will cost. So we are coming to you now to provide the actual amount that is needed to improve our facilities so that it can be fit for purpose. So basically what we'll be asking is another 1.4 million to the 2 million already provided for in the budgets. If there's any member who has been using our leisure centers and the ice rink, you've seen that they are in a dilapidated situation. So we need to improve them to be suitable for now and in the future to come. So that's introduction from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything to add from the officer perspective before we open for clarifications from the floor?
Again.
Apologies. I've been on the call since 6 o'clock and unfortunately just dropped out for a second. So I'm pretty sure, having experience, Councillor Makonga, that you've done an excellent intro. Obviously, we've been working together now with More Leisure in relation to making sure that we've got a really exciting programme of investment ready for all the leisure centres. So this is based on the expert opinion of More Leisure's officers involved and also input from ourselves. It was something which was put through the procurement process. So something which as a really exciting impact, we think, for the citizens of Oxford across our facilities, but also safeguards the sustainability of the sites as well in the longer term. So this is something where we'll get loads of excellent benefits in regards to physical activity, and impacts around reducing inequalities, but also safeguards a return, obviously, for the council as well, in relation to activities. That's all I was going to say. I mean, we've done some work, obviously, in relation to some engagement with users to this stage with More Leisure, and I can go into more detail of that if there are some questions around that as well.
Thank you, Hagen. Appreciated. So in terms of questions from the panel, and just again, if it is an exempt item, just hold off on that. But Councillor Ottino first, please. And I'll take other questions together if other hands raised. Thank you, Simon.
I mean, yeah, later on I would like to people to just talk through Appendix 4 because I can't understand it. But in terms of the Lees Leisure Centre, I mean, I see the thinking of under usage in the daytime and that this soft play area would create more usage, but it's taking away half of the sports hall. And what I want to be clear about is how in the evenings when people aren't at work and adults are more likely to use the leisure centre, how often both sides of that sports hall are used, because I'm aware that often one activity takes up one side, like the roller derby or netball or some sort of football, and badminton might be on the other side. What I'm worried about is that this will mean in the evenings lots of people won't be able to book a badminton court or do those activities. We need to know how often they're both in use, because essentially those people aren't going to book it. And is there really anywhere else that they can go? I mean, I don't know if there really is spare capacity in school sports halls and things. So if this was like saying put a soft play area additional added onto the leisure centre, and there's lots of space out there, I'll be more excited about it. But I am worried about us losing half a sports hall space. Leisure is not just provided by the local authority, it's provided by all sorts of private companies and whatever. And I think sports hall, local authorities have a responsibility to provide sports halls that have got that sort of use for all sorts of sports that maybe don't bring in so much money as this soft play. So yeah, I would like that information about how much use is in the evenings and how many people are going to miss out.
Thank you, Simon. And we'll come back to the exempt items in the appendix after. I can't see any other hands at the moment, in which case I'll just ask Mike two questions, which is, one is that, can you clarify these state-of-the-art inflatables that are being invested in? Sort of what actually are they? Are there risks to the council in their usage? How are they going to be stored? What do they look like? Because we're investing in them significantly. And then you notice this interdependency with the Lees Youth Hub. Could you talk a little bit around how you're mitigating that interdependency around that, please? Thank you. So is it, I'm not sure who would like to respond to these three. Would it be yourself or?
It's again, then I'll just contribute 1 or 2 points after that.
Thanks ever so much, Chair, and Councillor Tino. Absolutely, completely understand obviously your concerns, and we owe you a spreadsheet in relation to the bookings across the facilities. What we are aware of, that although it is really underutilized in the daytime, its usage in the evening is slightly more. It's certainly not fully booked by any means at all, so there would be some impact on some groups. However, what more leisure are looking to try and do, there's almost like a key conversation to be had with those groups affected in relation to, can we fit them in within any other facility within the centre? So recognising that the centre's got 4 other areas that can be booked, which actually might be more effective for some of the user groups. For example, there are some dance classes in one side of the sports hall. For example, there are some martial arts in one side of the sports hall. So there are those type of conversations which we would initially have a look at first across 4 different areas. Similarly, in regards to we have a 3G pitch, which again is hugely underutilized outside of the facility. So again, is there any opportunity to try and move groups, which the 3G pitch was developed obviously to try and accommodate football usage, and trying to talk to football clubs about encouraging more use outside of those areas. It's quite an unusual thing within the industry to have an 8-court sports hall. It is quite unusual, but also gives opportunities to try and do things ever so slightly differently. So recognizing that some of the standard sports that we have delivered within the Leeds Leisure Centre, such as badminton and football, really don't appeal to some of our young people and families. And we recognise that from feedback from obviously users. And it's all about, can we sort of like really sort of try and work on something which is going to enable a new breed of users into the leisure centre. Obviously, thinking about the Leeds Youth Hub, but also thinking about activities which are non-traditional, because we know that traditional it isn't working in its best sense. So recognise that there will be some impact with individual groups, but recognising again that we could facilitate those usages within the centres. And you mentioned a key point around that there is a city leisure offer as well, and it's not just the city council who delivers leisure within the city. So we do a lot of work obviously with the universities, both Oxford University and Brookes University. So now again, working very close with them, we meet on a regular basis. We will be talking about if there are any groups affected significantly who particularly want additional sports hall use, then there might be an opportunity, obviously, if we can't fill them in within Leeds Leisure Centre or Ferry Leisure Centre, then is there an opportunity to accommodate them at one of these other sites? So not just private, but also universities, and also very much with schools as well. So schools such as Cheney, schools such as Oxford Academy, and schools such as Oxford Spires Academy, where we do some work as well. So I suppose in a nutshell, it's key bits are the sports will certainly not full by any means, even at the night time. There will be some impacts to some users, but we'll be discussing those individually. And more leisure will be looking to really try and accommodate, firstly within the leisure centres and at Leeds Leisure Centre. Secondly, if not possible, then looking afar to a ferry leisure centre, which is obviously within Oxford City Council's facilities, and then thirdly, further afield if at all possible, but recognising the need to try and do something which is not traditional, which is not, you know, providing the usage and is not driving down inequalities within the area.
Okay, thank you very much on that. And just picking up on one of the points, I can see Simon's got his hand raised again, so we'll take these points together. But have you done an analysis, or could you do analysis on these new sports? For instance, I understand, and I don't know what it is actually, but this sport paddle, for instance, becoming really popular. You know, you talk about new sports that are emerging that might use leisure facilities. And connected to that, sports hall athletics, I know is like in sports hall is a really accessible way to get people of all backgrounds into an active lifestyle. And so have you considered facilities related to that? And if not, is that something that can be looked at? I'll also go back to Councillor Ottino just for his additional remarks as well, because he's got his hands raised, before coming back to you, Hagen. Thank you. Councillor
I suppose
Ottino.
I'm not reassured by we will look into this. There might be opportunities elsewhere. I think before we make this decision, we need to definitely know that there are opportunities elsewhere. I don't want residents of Blackburn, Leeds and Northfield Brook saying they can no longer book a badminton court there in the evening when we know that this play area won't be used in the evening because children will be in bed. I think there are sports that need sports halls, and you can't do them in the dance room. You know, I was a teacher, and I've been to sports or athletics events where we used both sides of that sports hall, and we had a lot of schools there in the competition. And that space at Leeds Leisure Centre is unique in the city, I think. I'm not sure. I don't think that's available elsewhere on that scale. I'm wondering why they haven't looked at initially. You know, if they're saying it's not being booked fully, why have they not looked at other ways of getting more people in to do the sports that you could do in a sports hall? I think when we have a responsibility to sort of, you know, promote things like netball and whatever, that, you know, they're not going to bring in money, but they are traditional sports, and that is one of the places that we can do that. So I would like to know exactly how many people are affected, and exactly, is there really space at, for instance, at Oxford Academy? I don't know if that's booked out already, or at Oxford Spires, but, you know, potentially nearby-ish to Leeds Leisure Centre. So cautious that we really do know, and we're not going to have lots of people upset that they can no longer play badminton or do roller derby, because you won't be able to do both those things at once because only one side will be available.
Thank you, Simon. And just, I think one thing that I just want to note for the record is that I acknowledge that in Summertown, the Master Ferry plans, they have been amended based on the feedback received from active residents who were concerned about the loss of the squash court. And I'd like to acknowledge the positive development that, you know, that's going to be retained as a result of this feedback, but recognising, as Councillor Ottino has said, that there could well be still demands in the community around the Leeds centre, but perhaps people haven't necessarily articulated what their concerns are yet. Or I'm just that channel of communication, I think, is really important. Can you clarify more around any communications you've had around feedback on these current plans? Because maybe residents are less engaged in providing feedback, but doesn't mean that they necessarily don't have that concern. Chu, I can see your hand raised, and I know we've got Hagen, you might want to come back on these points as well. So we'll come back over to you. I can't see any other hands from members, but if members do have other additional points, please do show your hands while Chu and others are responding. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Just pointing, building up on your point, actually, we are encouraging active user groups to come together so that we can have conversation, and that's where improvement and change comes in. And obviously, you have mentioned, I think it's Simon who mentioned Aspire. We did agree what we call community user agreement when one of the polls in Cowley was being close, so those conversations as well can take place. The only difficult, Simon, is Hagan can't guarantee here that this thing will happen. It's a long-term process and agreement discussion going on. So in terms of looking for other places to do the sports for, if they are losing, is to continue having those conversations. And obviously when we continue having those conversations, and again we add on this, we can find other places where this group can be accommodated. One thing I must point out is at the start of the procurement process, we knew as a council what we wanted, based on the feedback and the failure of the previous provider. So in the initial process, we had conversation and list of our wish list, for example, what we wanted the new provider to provide. So things like, free swimming, bonus schemes, all those benefits, we wanted to put them in our program, and I'm happy that Mo is carrying on with what we wanted. The other thing is we should remember that providing the leisure services is not a statutory obligation of any local authority. It's not mandatory. So look at around the country, our swimming pools are closing, for example. So we are lucky in Oxford that as a result of this procurement process, we are not going to close any of our leisure centers, any of our swimming pool. But we acknowledge that any change will impact some of these smaller groups. And this is where we are continuing to have those conversations, and More Leisure is more than happy to meet, and they've been doing that to talk about issues and how they can help out those who are impacted as a result of these changes coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Chu. Have we got any further remarks from Hagen at this stage from the officer perspective? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mkonga, for that as well. Just I suppose just to sort of come back on, the sports will just being for children in the evening, it won't be as well. So the mix of facilities in there will be applicable for adult and older child usage as well. So it should be usage which would be utilised at all times. It includes potentially a climbing wall, which which is part of the Leeds Youth Hub work as well. So which we're sort of added into the mix in relation to that. And yeah, as Councillor Mkonga says, we've got different agreements, obviously, with different operators within the city around community use aspects in relation to that. And I just picking up the point about paddle tennis as well. So paddle tennis, really good activity. It's something which we're talking to our tennis operator at the moment. So courtside, and looking at paddle or pickleball as well. So those two are really something which are really sort of taking really good usage particularly across Europe and in North America as well. So it's something which, potentially it's at some of the outdoor courts, and also in consultation with clubs such as North Oxford Lawn Tennis Club, looking at different opportunities that might arise in relation to that. So I suppose not so much indoor, but potentially outdoor opportunities in relation to that. And certainly with Sports Hall Athletics, very much linked into Oxford City Athletics Club, who are the local club obviously within the city. They do some work around this, and it's again sort of like trying to sort of join up some of the aspects with More Leisure and making sure that there are opportunities obviously linked into usage where there's availability, of course, as well.
Thank you, Hagen, for that. Just you mentioned the athletics facility, a concern that I've personally raised separately, which has been the fact that it's not as accessible, the athletics club, as it should be. I have personal experience as a growing up doing athletics in the most accessible sort of sports facility, I think, in Wrexham, and I remember just anyone could just turn up anytime. Whereas here, you've got to commitment up front, and it's around high performance athletes rather than making it inclusive, which is really kind of a little concerning, because a child doesn't know that they like athletics or they're good at it until they've actually started. So I do have some concerns around the inclusiveness of that. How does this leisure investment programme relate to athletics specifically, given that the
track is managed separately. So could you clarify that, and also around the accessibility around sports hall athletics, because and the use of sports hall, because if that is linked to this sort of quite exclusive approach to managing an athletics club, that is a concern that I think we as Scrutiny should be raising if we're wanting this facility to be inclusive. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all, and really valid comments. In short, that they're not linked. So yeah, the leisure centres and the leisure investment are linked very much into the leisure centres, and as you mentioned, obviously Oxford City Athletics Club have a long lease in place with the City Council. I do know from first-hand experience, my daughter actually is a member of Oxford City Athletics Club, so I do know that they are really struggling for coaches and volunteers at the moment. So we're all trying to do our part in relation to support them in that. But again, they do. There is some work to be done. I've raised some of these concerns. I think you mentioned before, and we picked them up. And I think there's a recognition that we haven't got everything right. There's work in progress, and actually we're struggling a bit here for coaches, and we're trying to press the word out to try and support them in relation to some of that work as well.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's helpful. So at this point, I can't see any other hands raised. We do have, I know that Councillor Artino does want to refer to the exempt appendix shortly. So what I suggest is we first of all, as a panel, turn to any recommendations related to what we've already discussed, and if there's anything specific to that. I can see that there might be a recommendation around the sort of the consultation process to do with the reallocation of the Lees Sports Hall space and any analysis around alternative capacity. So I'd like to maybe come to the panel on that point. And I'd also like to just table at this point, I do understand that previously the Scrutiny Committee has raised the issue of ongoing monitoring and reporting of the new contractor. So in this case, since there were failings of a previous provider. So just want to table that as a recommendation that we get some sort of regular feedback on the monitoring and evaluation of the performance of this current provider at regular intervals. So put those 2 points on the table. I hopefully I've summarised the concerns raised so far. Anyone want to come in on recommendations to these two effects? Maybe Councillor Artino specifically, I know it's to do with your point. Are you happy with the recommendation around the kind of consultation around alternative capacity and provision on that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alice, do you have what you need regarding a recommendation to that effect? I know Hagen's got his hand.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, super. And also, I can't see any dissent around a recommendation about monitoring, evaluation, reporting around the contract. But Alice, would you like to come in just to clarify what was meant by that from the former Scrutiny panel? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just to say that I think that's a valid point for Scrutiny to raise. I just don't think it's necessary to make a recommendation on it, because a recommendation was made previously. It's just kind of actioning that to make it part of the work plan. So if the committee wants, I can just pick that up with officers and we can get something to the committee in due course rather than a formal recommendation. That's all.
That sounds good. Thank you. Happy to take your advice on that. Hagen, you've got your hand raised, so maybe over to you, just any reflections or comments at this stage.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I do recognise there are a couple of questions that you'd asked which I haven't come back to yet. So one was you raised about state-of-the-art inflatables, and are they safe, and obviously what do they look like? So these are large-scale inflatables, so they're they're very exciting. They're tried and tested throughout the industry, so it's quite the norm. But of course, there are a lot of safety works which need to go into place, such as risk assessments and ROSPA, so obviously Royal Society Prevention Accidents, that type of work which needs to happen to ensure that these are implemented in the right way. So so that's on the other one. And the other question you asked was about the Leeds Youth Hub and how these, how the works interdepend. It's a really good question. We're working really closely with More Leisure around the phasing of these works. So they'll need to be very clearly defined, which we've got a draft program in place. The driver is the Leeds Youth Hub works, and the reason that's the key driver is that the funding is time limited. So the funding for the Leeds Hub it expires at the end of March 2025. Our program's in place to achieve that, so that's not a problem at all. But then we need to make sure that the works align. So More Leisure are absolutely agreed into that. There are some works that can happen side by side. For example, works in the gym. They're completely separate. They can be managed in a safe safe way, with both construction elements being undertaken in a positive and safe environment, and less impact obviously to our citizens as well.
Thank you for those clarifications. I know that the leisure centres do offer children's birthday parties, and I can imagine the inflatables then will be something that is popular there. But getting the accident prevention work right related to that, to ensure that any children attending parties that are using them can swim, I think will be essential for risk mitigation. We don't
absolutely.
And just want to welcome the proposal to invest in the system, this drowning prevention system. Is it Poseidon or something like that it's referred to? Which so great to see that, because that's important, particularly in a city which this is an issue. We do see drownings in the rivers, but ensuring that we've got that in place to manage it, in the risk in the pool. So thank you. Okay, so I think we've got one recommendation just in summary coming out of this. So thank you to all the contributions for this. I recognise some people are quiet on this. I'm hoping that's because you've got nothing else to add. Please don't feel reluctant to share any feedback. At this point then, what I suggest we will do, given that we have a question around the appendix, which is an exempt item. Alice, I think I need to refer to you to ask whether yourself and Celeste can put this into private session and read the required text for that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to read the required text at this point, but just for the purpose of the live stream, we'll just be closing the live stream temporarily while we discuss the exempt items, and we should be back